So I don't normally make an announcement prior to the start of the episode, but I felt like this was really important. If you want to build amazing worlds for your games, make sure that you click on the link in the show notes to grab your free 12-page Ultimate World Building Guide. Inside is a comprehensive roadmap with practical questions and checklists helping you build vibrant, captivating worlds for you and your players. It brings together many of the insights that you're going to gain by listening to my guest and professional GM, David Northeast. I know you'll enjoy it. All right, thanks, and now on to the episode. We live in the world our questions create. What essential question should every GM and player ask when crafting immersive tabletop role-playing worlds? In this episode, I get to speak with professional game master David Northeast, and he reveals the proven S.P.E.R.M framework. That's right, you heard me right, S.P.E.R.M. It's a powerful system of targeted questions that transforms ordinary settings into unforgettable living worlds. And whether you're a new or experienced game master, this conversation delivers the exact tools you'll need to refine your world building immediately. Welcome to Claim to Game. We help tabletop gamers have a great time with friends to experience amazing stories. It can be overwhelming to start and run great games. Let's make it easier for you to play any game you want to have fun with your friends. I'm Clint.scheirer. I've helped thousands of students in my career find their way to better themselves and better their game. With more than 10 years experience in leadership, coaching, live performance, and public speaking, I know I can help you create immersive, low-stress games you'll never forget. It's time for you to make your claim to game. So David, here's something that I have to ask, right? You have a background in storytelling. You have a background in performing arts, literature, and it clearly informs your world building. When anybody goes on and looks at your bio, looks at what you do when you run games, it's clear that you have this in your repertoire. So what I want to know is, how do these experiences, the storytelling, the performing arts, the literature that you've consumed, how does it influence the way that you create immersive settings when you're trying to world build for your gamers, not just making great NPCs, but also the world that they live and breathe in?
When you watch a lot of stuff online about how to world build and how to, create your own campaigns, quite often the advice is start small, start with a single town and build out. My brain is very weird. It likes to work it out in reverse order. So I like to see the lay of the land. I like to see where the mountains naturally form. I like to see where the deserts occur. And I try to create this almost geologically and geographically accurate world that makes sense. So when you initially stare at it, it's, oh, there's nothing wrong here. But then I start adding things in. So, for example, in my world of Eulalia, which I've got a 2,000-year history for, the desert is called the Green Desert because there's an oasis every mile or so, which is a really, really sort of unheard of thing in the real world. But when it comes to using my background in performing arts and English literature, more so when I'm world building, I sort of lean on the literary side. It comes down to things like, when it's writing the story, it's things like symbolism. I love symbolism in the world, and everything is there for a purpose. There is very, very little I put in my world that is just random. Now, occasionally I will put random things in the world to make the world feel organic and natural. So you might sort of see just a passerby wearing a green coat, for example, and I'll describe that to the players and they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll take a note of that. Okay. And you never know, they might go and talk to that NPC, and now I need to fill out that NPC's family, their history, their backstory. I mean, you know how that goes. But sometimes the random things are just as important as the very, very specific and story specific things. When it comes to the performing arts aspect of things, that is where my role play comes in. I tend to always have my camera on when I'm GMing a game because I'm obviously predominantly an online GM. And I'm very, what's the word? Very performative with it. And I try to make each character have intrinsic and unique characteristics that are both visual and audible. Whether it's the speed, the pitch, perhaps there's a specific way they pause in the middle of each sentence. For example, one of my favorite NPCs that I've ever made, and I won't go into too many details just in case my players are listening, is Hoddo the Goblin. Now, Hoddo the Goblin has some very, very unique characteristics rather than your sort of impolitically correct bulbous noses and the oh, I want my girl, that kind of. No, he is a pig-snouted, pig-eared, green-skinned goblin who wears a potato sack and has an oversized bag that drags along the back of the floor the entire time. He is a vendor for my players, but he's always the same similar character. He's always this chaotic little, "Oh, hi guys, how you doing today? What can I offer you? Perhaps one of my special Hotto potions?" And he always has this really upbeat, high-pitched, irritating voice. And I make sure it's as irritating as possible for my players because I don't want them to know how good he really is until the very, very last reveal of him.
You brought up a good point, right? So when people think of world building, you started out saying that you kind of backwards engineer what a real world would look like. You were talking about mountains. You were talking about, I thought of cartography is what I was thinking of, maps. And, there's some really wonderful map making tools out there. I've used Dungeon Draft for individual maps that I want to make, or World Draft if I wanted to make something bigger, more at a larger scale. But then you shifted your response to characters. Characters are what make the world. That is fascinating. And when it comes to characters, I think there were two things that I heard you say. Consistency with the character, right? Hotto always talks with the same pitch. He always has the same persona. He always shows up in a very similar way. So he starts to become real because he's familiar. They're not going to come back later and Hotto has a really deep voice. And you're like, "What happened to you, Hotto? Did you have a rough night, Hotto?"
Well, occasionally his voice does change, but that's normally because he's taken something that he shouldn't have taken, i.e. one of his own potions.
How do you do that? How do you make a character consistent? Because it's crazy how fast things can move. You mentioned how your characters are brought to life when your players bring them to life. The person in the green coat wasn't anybody until your players said that they were somebody, started talking to them. Can you tell me a little bit about your process of one, coming up on the fly, if it is on the fly, with how you're giving that, you're breathing life into that character, and then how do you remember to keep consistent with them the next time they want to go to that green coat person who didn't exist less than 10 seconds before?
So, I have a few like almost like stock personas. So obviously, if you want to use free artwork, for example, you normally go buy some stock art from somewhere. I have something similar. I have stock personas that I don't really use, and I will thrust them onto these characters until they become intrinsically woven into whether it's the character backstories, whether it's on the fly I say something stupid like, "Oh yes, I'm a really important member of this town because of this, and this," and then I'm like, "Oh, now I really have to give this person a persona," and very, very quickly the performer in me builds this character up, and who's in his background, who's You know, who's talking and whispering in his ears? If he's a government official, who's paying him off? You know, when it comes to maintaining a character's persona, it's easier the longer you've known a character. As a GM, the longer you've known this character, the more that you've used this character, the easier it becomes to maintain them. So, for example, in my Age of Dragons campaign, there are 4 tyrannical dragons within the universe, and I know each one of them very, very intimately, so I know how I want them to come across. However, little old lady number 1 from down the street in the hallway, I don't necessarily have that same level of intimacy with her. So there will be small variations between their meeting, but again, it is trying to keep them to that consistent level as much as possible.
When you take notes, so like I'm a note taker. I should say if you take notes, I shouldn't just assume that you're a note taker. I feel like I run away from a session when I'm game mastering. And whether I'm using, Scrivener, doing something digital, some people use like Microsoft tools, or maybe they're using an actual legal pad. When you're trying to capture quickly before they move on, something that you can come back to later, what are your tools? Like, how do you capture what you created in the moment so that you can bring that back later when it may not be one of those stock personas that you know so well?
I mean, I always get the players to do their recap anyway at the start of the session, because then you know what the players know. And if they've forgotten little details, it's sometimes more fun to leave them forgotten and bring them back later and have that, oh crap, I forgot about that moment. But ultimately, I've come across a tool that I was part of the closed alpha for, and I can't say much more because it's still in closed beta. But essentially, it is an AI derivative tool. It's not like fully AI. It doesn't like steal information from the internet or anything like that. It literally just note takes for you. And it can derive like different characters, different factions, different locations and things, and it writes out the descriptions and gives you a session summary. I've been using it religiously. Yes, obviously there's a few bugs in the background like you would expect with beta stuff, but it's saved me hours of work.
Yeah, so technology such as AI, and before we started,
Yeah.
you had a very important question, and I'm just going to dive right into it because it's on people's minds, right? Like ChatGPT, Claude, there's all Perplexity. AI tools are bumping up everywhere. And one of the game types that I really love, and people can go back and listen why I love it if they listen back to episode 9. Should you play GM-less or go with a GM? They can go back and listen to some of the recent episodes that I've done related to GM-less gaming. But I like GM-less gaming, not because I don't feel like roles like your own, a professional GM that really adds such a colorful flavor that I don't believe any sort of AI or simulation can provide the soul of. But I like it because it allows everybody at the table, when you play a GM-less game, to evenly distribute the responsibilities of the storytelling. And there isn't one person who has to step up and be that facilitator. So what you brought up was, when you say GM-less gaming, Clint, are you talking about somebody speaking to an AI, and the AI is really taking on the role of the game master? And I'm like, I don't know if I really want that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I like that. And you're like, well, some people do play that way. Can you elaborate on how that works if you were using AI for a game master role when you're playing a role-playing game?
So I will preface this by saying AI is a tool and not a replacement for anything, anywhere, at any point.
Amen, brother.
I am definitely of the mind that AI is a very useful tool. So, for example, I'm in the middle of writing a session or in the middle of writing a campaign, and I just get writer's block. I can talk to ChatGPT about something completely separate, away from my campaign and my D&D stuff, and just mess around with it, and it can break that block. That's one way I use that as a tool. Another way is a name generator. Give me 15 generic names that I can put then on a table, and if I need a name for one of these NPCs walking down the street, so I'm not stressing about, oh my god, I haven't got a list of names, and little things like that. But in terms of replacing a GM, absolutely not. Now, I know there are some individuals and some people who have things like severe social anxiety. And these people are using, or I have seen them using things like ChatGPT to be their game master, because their social anxiety is too crippling for them to enjoy the game. And in that instance, it's actually, in my opinion, a disability aid rather than a replacement for an actual GM. Some may argue that it could make the social anxiety worse. I would argue it gets them comfortable enough with the game, the rule sets and everything else to then potentially extend that and reach out to other groups and other people around them to then bring them into the game.
That's fascinating. It's like it's like allowing them to practice the social construct of playing a game with other people to then step into that when they feel ready.
Yes.
That's awesome. I would say that maybe a GM-less game in my mind would be a step in the direction of not necessarily playing alone.
Yeah.
Although there are solo GM-less games where you could play by yourself. And in that case,
oh yeah,
when I say GM-less game, I mean using oracles or tables, like you mentioned, a GM, a name generator, a city name generator, NPC ideas, things like that. So I'm going to spin it, right? You run many GM-led games because you are a professional GM, which is so darn cool that I'm talking to a professional GM. And I have run games on my own, but they're always social. They're always just with friends or people that I enjoy the company of. And GM-less games I've run in addition to that. David, when I was thinking about GM-led games versus GM-less games, one of the cool things about a GM-led game for the GM is the GM has full control over those world's details, at least before the players of chaos come in and wreck it to pieces. In a GM-less game, you're relying on mechanics. You're relying on the oracle tables. You're relying on the oracle tables for making decisions, which is also known as roll tables for those who are like, what the heck is an oracle? What techniques do you use to ensure that your world still remains authentic in your GM-led games? How do you continue to make it feel like what you envisioned is still happening regardless of your agents of chaos, your players?
My campaigns are open sandbox. Every campaign I write is a complete open world. So I will give the players 3 or 4 plot hooks. They can follow one to their heart's content, and then, perhaps they get distracted and go off that way. So I start thinking, okay, well, what are the consequences of this not being done up here whilst they're intervening with something over here? And open world games are very, very interesting because your standard module assumes you go from point A to point B to point C doing these things. And obviously it's not quite as linear as that, but ultimately all roads will lead to Rome. With the way I run games, if you say, for example, you fend off a dragon attack, you manage to turn the dragon around and send them away. Cool. And the players then leave that town and come back maybe a week later for something. Well, what's happened in that week in that town? Has the dragon summoned an army to come along and literally steamroll over it? Very possibly. The dragon's been fought off. The dragon's been deterred. The players have left. Well, if the dragon has agents or spies in that city, he's going to come right back in, and he knows that the manpower level is down. Or perhaps the dragon doesn't have those spies and that information network there, in which case the dragon's not likely to come back for a little while until he is better prepared, or she is better prepared to take on this town or city. And so when the players return, the players will be recognized, certainly recognized. Vendors will change, shops will have new stocks, markets will change. They might come back, they might think, oh, actually, that person from the marketplace had some really, really cool items. We've got enough gold now, let's go back and buy it. So they go back looking for that vendor, only to find out that that vendor has moved on. So they start asking around, they say, oh yeah, he's on his way to that city up there now. Oh, great. So now the players have to traverse without those goods, without those items, in the hopes that they run into him again. Perhaps they try and catch up to him on the road. Perhaps, they can't quite make pace. It's all very fluid. And the more flexibility and fluidity you allow yourself as a GM, the better you can make your worlds and the more dynamic you can make them as well.
So your strategy to build the world that you envision is to keep it as open and sandboxy as possible.
Yeah.
So that you don't get trapped into thinking it has to be a certain way.
Oh, absolutely. If you get to this mindset, so quite often there's a meme going around. It was saying, oh, the players don't want to go to the town that they were meant to go to for this plot hook. Well, this plot hook now appears in this town. And to me, that's less interesting than them going to the new town, finding something interesting, interacting with something interesting there, coming back a week later and hearing stories of maybe another adventuring party, or perhaps nobody managed to find the mayor's daughter that was missing, and now the mayor's gone mad, and had somebody been here a week ago, perhaps she could have been saved, and really driving that point home to the players that, you not being there has caused this to happen.
Their choices have consequences.
Yes. Every choice has a consequence, not just the big ones, but the little ones too.
And that's what makes it real, because that's how life is. Like real life, all of our choices have consequences.
And this actually brings me to another interesting point. Sorry,
Go ahead.
I don't mean to hijack.
No, hijack. Hijack away.
One of my biggest pet peeves as a GM. Now, as a professional GM, I let my players play how they want to play the game for the most part, with boundaries set based in the world that they choose to play in. But party composition, it is not the player's job to ensure a balanced party composition. Because, as a prime example in real life, you didn't know you and I would be having this conversation 5 years ago. However, when it comes to the game, if you want that realistic feel free to have 5 bards that run into each other. They have this rivalry between them to the point that they cannot leave each other's sides because they have to prove that they're the best bard. You as the GM then take that energy, you take that party composition, and you build balanced encounters around it. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you can't be a bit of a bullier with it either. If they've chosen as a party to play 5 bards, whether preemptively or whatever, or these bards have chosen to go on an adventure together without hiring any kind of muscle. Because don't forget, you can put hirelings in the game. You can put DMPCs in the game. It doesn't take anything away from the players. But this band of traveling bards, if they're going to fight a dragon, well, you better hope that one of them is College of Swords and one of them is College of Eloquence and, whatever else in the context of D&D at the very least. And, they have to then manage with the tools that they have. Again, make it a balanced but challenging encounter. It doesn't have to be that the dragon must be defeated by a noble knight, or we must have an archer in case he takes flight. No, have the bards running after a dragon who's flying through the sky. The entertainment value is endless.
You're I love this. I love that you're saying this too, because I would love to play like Blades in the
Hmm.
Dark, right? So that's a
Yeah.
game that you are basically all rogues, and your job is to be like
Yeah.
thieves. You have different abilities, different whatever, but you're all rogues. And I believe you could do that in D&D. I believe that you can have all bards. I believe that you can have all one class. Play to what you want to be, not to what you think you should be in order to successfully win at the
Yeah. Yeah.
adventure. It's like a Chinese finger trap at that point. You're not really
Yeah.
winning. You're really just sticking yourself with one story. This leads me to another question. And what I'm thinking is, right, so you have the player's class or the type of character they want to be, but you also have the individual player themselves. Like the individual is a human who has come to this gaming table that brings their own unique storytelling abilities, right? When
Hmm.
you're running a game with multiple personalities, multiple diverse people that are all coming together, uh, how do you keep that moving as a GM? How do you manage somebody who may be ready to impulsively jump into a situation where another person maybe wants to pause and think about it and talk about it? How do you keep the adventure from becoming disjointed while still honoring how that person wants to play and who they are?
So I think it comes down to an extent, the rule of yes. So anyone who's had any kind of experience in performing arts knows what the rule of yes is. And the rule of yes is based in improvisation. If you are improvising a scene, the rule of yes is yes and. So I take
Mhm.
what you're doing, or what you've just said to me, I will agree with it and not outright shout no down to it. We're not doing that. I will go, yes, and this, and then offer something to give that more flesh, more meat. When you've got diverse personalities at a table, so you've got the dungeon delvers, the people who like to go on the long, extended dungeons and fight encounter after encounter after encounter.
Kids that never got to completely beat Zelda growing up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They like to min-max their characters as much as humanly possible. They're looking for all the loot and the gold. And at the same table, you can have players like me when I'm a player. I hold my hands up. I'm a chaos goblin. I am a literal chaos goblin. I won't tell you the things that I did in 40k Wrath and Glory a couple of weeks ago, but my characters are always suboptimal characters. They tend to be not necessarily joke characters, but definitely meme characters. The high intelligence barbarian. Excuse me, sir, you seem to be pissing me off. And going down that line and I think of how I can mash different personalities and characters and classes together and have a bit of fun with it that way. But when you've got those two separate personalities at the table, sometimes it will boil down to you're really not right for this group. So if the whole group more leans towards the sort of meme characters, the silly characters, and the chaos goblins, and you've got the one guy at the table who's basically trying to be dad to the group, do serious role play, and wants to go dungeon delving every other session, they're probably not the right group. And this is what I would say to any other professional GM out there, and this is why I advocate so hard for professional GMs to stop the copy and paste. Stop copy and pasting your ads everywhere and talk to people, because you may not be the right GM for that person, but that person might see your advert for the game, think, oh, that looks amazing, and sign up to your game. Well, at that point, if that player doesn't have a good time, they're going to think negatively about the profession. It could cause your reputation to come down if people see you advertising again and they leave a comment or they leave reviews and things like that. It's very, very important that we as professional GMs get the balance right. I myself, in the last 3 months, have turned away 30 players. because I know I'm not the right GM for them. Not because I couldn't accommodate them, because I very, very easily could accommodate them at my tables. But it's the tables I currently have players for, and I know those players fairly well. And I know that they would not mesh with the group, if that makes sense.
In my mind, because we said this at the very beginning, part of world building, I don't know if you heard that there's thunder. Maybe
I heard that.
yeah, that's
the
the impressiveness about what I'm about to say.
Either that or it's an ominous warning.
Yes, don't say it, Clint. I think we said it at the beginning that NPCs and characters and individuals in the world are a big part of what makes the world believable and real.
Yeah.
That also is appropriate to say for the players' characters as well. And if they are getting caught in a out of game friction, as you're describing, like this person wants to dungeon delve, this person wants to be silly and role play and have their have their hit. Well, that's not going to help create that believability, because now people are being drawn out of the story to maybe the conflict that's happening at the table.
Yeah.
Hey, quick pause in the episode. Ever wanted to chat about tabletop RPGs or share your unique insights or just geek out about tabletop RPGs with someone who gets it? Now's your chance. I'm opening up guest spots on the Claim to Game podcast, and I'd love to feature you. Are you working on an exciting project? Do you have a fresh take on running or playing games? Or do you just want to help others have an amazing time at the table? Let's make it happen. If you got a mic, stable internet, and a passion for great games, claim your spot on a future interview by clicking on the link in the show notes to book your interview now. Let's talk about tabletop RPGs and make something awesome together. Can't wait to hear from you. Now back to the episode. My question with you, you said something interesting. They may not be the right fit for the table. Has there ever been a time where you had to have a hard conversation with a player and said, hey, I think you need to drop out of the group? Or is that something that you try to vet before it gets to that point?
So primarily I vet players anyway. Like, as I say, I'm a direct sales professional. I was in business to business sales for years. I was in business to customer sales for years. I will vet players through the skills that I've learned down that road, which is very, very helpful. I can find out who the player is, what their background is, what sort of adventures they've played or what they're looking for, what their expectations of a GM are. Even as far as, are they part of any sort of diverse groups? Are they a minority group? That kind of, because first impressions really, really matter. And for a lot of people in the current climate, if you can't present yourself as a safe space for certain demographics, then you may as well write yourself out of this game already. Don't get me wrong, there are those of the other side of the argument, without going too political, but for the most part, I think people see D&D as a haven of escapism. And, certain groups need that escapism more than others. I have had to remove players from campaigns before now. I've had to have hard conversations with people before now. I have a 2-strike rule within my games. You upset me once, you get a strike. You upset me a second time, you are gone. Obviously, depends on the extremity of what you've done. But generally speaking, I'll have a conversation with someone, ask them to curb their behavior, and if I see improvement, fantastic. If not, then I will hit it like harder than a ton of bricks. The 2 times I've only had since 2023, 2022, late 2022, when I started this. Since then to now, I've only had to have a conversation with 2 individuals at the table about their in-game etiquette and how it was not appropriate for the group or the table. And both times came the same result. And I don't know if this is just a general thing or these 2 people just happen to have the same reaction. They immediately, upon me having that conversation with them, a couple of days later, messaged me, and all of a sudden they've got a problem with my GM style. They've got a problem with how I handle encounters. They've got a problem with how I handle the roleplay aspect. They've got a problem with this. They got a problem with that. And having that conversation after, like, them sending those messages after like 15 to 20 sessions of gameplay, because I had to have a conversation with them about one incident, or an incident that hasn't improved after a conversation before. It just strikes me as convenient that that is the moment they choose to unload.
Several words came to mind as you were speaking, and one word is boundaries, right? Boundaries help people feel safe.
Yes.
Sometimes people think boundaries are a restrictive thing, but really it gives freedom. And when boundaries are crossed, people don't feel safe at the table. The story is going to be affected. The world that you've created is going to be affected. Fun is going to be affected. People aren't going to be having as much fun when they don't feel safe. So everything that you're saying makes sense to me. Kudos to you for leaning into hard conversations and having boundaries. Like that's a healthy thing, dude.
This is one of the biggest thing you'll find, is that people that don't like boundaries will call it controlling. The difference between a boundary and controlling is, a boundary is for me. A boundary is me saying, you do not cross this line. Controlling is saying, this is for you. You don't behave like this. And a boundary is saying, you don't behave like this at my table. You can behave like that all you want elsewhere. You don't do it at my table. My table is a no-go zone. And if you behave like this, there will be a consequence to that behavior. And I'm I'm quite lenient with people, because I know sometimes people can say things, the wrong way at the wrong time to the wrong person. And I try to handle those conversations with a level of maturity that isn't just, no, you're gone, that's it. No, you said the wrong thing. I try to get a better understanding of what was going through their mind when they said that thing. Is what they said actually what they meant? There are some things that are like, goodbye. But for the most times it's things like friendly banter that has just landed the wrong way. That kind of thing is this kind of stuff you need to have a conversation with, and sit down with both players as well, the player that was offended and the player that has done the offending, and just say to them, look guys, it was a misunderstanding, can we move past this? Just make sure that we're more cautious in future about how we say certain things or how we approach this subject.
I love this conversation. This is, I told you before, I think what's going to happen is we're going to be breaking this into two episodes. I want to talk about the world building, which you've done a great job, which then leans into why professional GMs can really create a safe space and make it easier, because you have a set of skills, a set of strategies that you're facilitating a group that are really marvelous. So before we move on more into professional GMing, because that's where I do want to lean the rest of our conversation, something that I like to do, and it's okay if you need to take a pause for this, because I gave it to you like last minute, but something that I like to do, and Eric Newsom, who was formerly of NPR News and did many shows for them before moving on to other things, he's a pop culture freelance writer. He has a strategy where for any business he starts, he asks his people to create a 10-word phrase that helps them remind themselves of who they are and what they do. And I like to take that strategy, and instead of, what do I do? Who am I? If there was something that you needed somebody to remember, specifically our listener who's like, I want to create worlds that are real, that feel real, and that my players love or that I love, what is a 10-word phrase that you could give them to help remember the core message of how worlds can be built like that?
Right. Got it. S.P.E.R.M will get you a world.
S.P.E.R.M will get you a world. Tell me more about that. Hold on. Sperm will get you a world. Oh, you're using your acronym. Okay, tell me the acronym of SPERM and tell me how it's going to get us a world. This is so exciting.
Social, political, economical, religious, military. The 5 basics of every society ever to exist.
Did you come up with that or did you get that
got
from
it from
something?
somewhere a very long time ago, and I cannot remember where. I would love to credit them.
That's okay. From now on, David Northeast is the one who coined the word sperm.
I do not want to be known for that, thanks.
Never mind. Awesome. So tell me more about all of those things. All those things. I mean, obviously people may know those words individually, but what are you considering when you're considering each one of those acronym letters?
So each one of those words, social, political, economical, religious, and military, represents a portion of a society. Now, some societies will have more of one and less of others, but ultimately they are the 5 key influences in any society ever. The social aspect, you think of things like local meeting places, for example. So like your taverns, your inns, local events, parties, these kinds of things. How do they work within the society that they live in? And also, they bleed across sometimes, but for the most part, the social aspect is the people. Who are the people here? Where do they fit in society themselves? Political is obviously, who's ruling? What kind of system of rule have you got in place? Is it a tyranny? Is it a democracy? Is it a autocracy? Is it a technocracy? There are a lot of different forms of leadership that have been around throughout the years. Economical. There are 2 types of economies. There is the external economy and the internal economy. The easiest way to explain this is your internal economy, if we speak in terms of America, is all the trade that America does with inside America, or the USA does with inside the USA. External economy is all the trade that USA does with the rest of the world. Like, what do they bring in, what do they export, and what's the balance of that look like? Now, this can be scaled down massively to the level of a village even. What kind of small shops exist in a village? Well, you have to have something, at least like a farm. You perhaps have something along the lines of a grocer's. You'd have someone that brings in the local news to the village and that kind of thing, like a town crier or that sort of thing. And these economies, these 2 different economies, you've got to work out how they link together as well. I feel that's quite important, because if say for example, the local farmer didn't get his feed for his animals last week, that's then going to impact the quality of his livestock. And if the quality of his livestock is affected, how's that going to affect the rest of the village? And then what kind of knock-on effect is that going to have? And you can really snowball with that kind of line of thought. Next was the religious aspect. Now, obviously, D&D has its own fantasy pantheons. In our world, we have a number of main religions: Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, Buddhism. These are just a few that have come to the top of my mind, and each one works very, very differently. They each have their own set of beliefs. They have their own set of rituals. For example, for Christians, their ritual is to go to a church on a Sunday to pray and have sermons and readings and that kind of thing. Whereas in Islam, they pray 5 times a day, facing eastward towards Mecca. You've got the Buddhists fasting, where they will only eat for a certain period of time during the day, or not eat at all for a period of days, or they fast and they restrict something in their lives. All these different rituals impact the lives of these people differently, and means that these people all have different lived experiences of their religions. How does that apply in your world? Especially when we start talking about fantasy pantheons. If you go back to the ancient pagan pantheons, like the Norse, the Greeks, the Romans, look at how their pantheons influenced their societies. There are stories and stories and stories, and I love Greek mythology. It is so beautifully dark. When people think of Greek mythology, 9 times out of 10 they will mention Disney's Hercules. I promise you, Disney's Hercules, romanticized is an underestimation to what they did to the Greek
well,
myths.
maybe like most things Disney with fairy tales.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this was like next level romanticizing.
Yes.
And lastly, military. And, what does their military look like? Do they even have a military? If they don't have a military, are they hiring mercenaries to protect them?
Yeah.
And again, you can scale it up and down. You can have a countrywide military, or you can have a very, very small focused military. If you think of the different divisions of the British military, you've got the SAS, you've got the Marines, the Army, the Navy. Each of these are specialized in different things. They are also of varying sizes. We are a maritime warfare country. Our Navy is huge for the size of our country per capita. And again, how does military impact your country? How does it impact your town? Is it perhaps your town is in a war-torn country, but they haven't been affected for some reason? Why have they not been affected? What's lying around the town that stops the armies? I run a one-shot not too long ago, and essentially the players... Oh, no, it wasn't a one-shot. It was an actual part of my campaign. The players had visited a town that had recently been destroyed by an ever-increasing curse. Basically, these creatures were being cursed by the land. There was something inside the land itself. And the people inside this town were safe from this curse. The creatures could not get in, but neither could anything else. And they could not leave. If they left, they would die because the creatures that had been turned and cursed would attack them. And then the players sort of went on a huge arc of digging down into the tunnel and finding actually there were giant crystal formations that were interacting with the ley lines, creating this protective field where these cursed creatures could not enter into the town. But it created a problem for the town because the town couldn't self-sustain. They didn't have enough space to expand, farm, or anything like that. And by the time the players got there, there was only 3 people left in the entire town. And so, it's thinking about the wider and you got to think of the wide picture, but you've also got to think of the small picture at the same time. And you've got to balance it out and really, really think about how these 5 sections of society interact with your world.
Yeah, S.P.E.R.M. Man, it's fantastic because as you were talking, several things came to mind. The questions that you're asking are fantastic. The how and the why. Why is this happening? Why? And then that leads to another why. There's a strategy that was not, I don't think, created by this guy, but the founder of Toyota. They had a process called the 5 whys. and they would go and ask, why is this problem happening? And usually the surface level problem was not the actual problem that needed to be solved. And what you're doing here is basically like the 18 whys that then are all interconnected. You know, when you were talking about the military, I was like, yeah, and every branch of that military in some way, shape, or form has a ideology that they live by that might be different than that other military, which then has very interesting role-playing and game facets if maybe some of the characters are a part of that military, or maybe they have interacted and had a run-in with them and they don't want to have anything to do with that faction or that military body. So this is cool. I'm going to be using this in my games. I'm going to be I'm going to have sperm on the brain.
Feel free. Well, as long as you don't tell people that I forcefully put it there, we'll be okay.
Yeah. So I'm just going to repeat it again for everybody. I'm going to repeat it again. Sperm will get you a world. Marvelous. Here's my final question. It's the quintessential podcast question. Whenever you finish, where can people find you, David? Where can they get connected? Where do you want them to connect with you?
So there are loads. So get pens and papers ready. If you want to find me on TikTok, it is at the Captain91. If you want to find me on Twitch, it is SS Adventurer, twitch.tv/SS Adventurer. If you want to find me on YouTube, it's youtube.com/SS Adventurer Productions. They are my three main ones. Blue Sky socials, I am the Captain91, and I think on X I am SS Adventurer, but don't worry, I'm not on X all that much.
Very good. And we'll have to connect on Blue Sky. I recently was encouraged by Craig Shipman to get on Blue Sky. It's a very, very cool way to interact with the tabletop community in a way that I haven't on any other platform yet.
I have heard good things about Blue Sky. I do like the look of Blue Sky and the feel of it.
Well, dude, I will make sure that you are available, because I'm sure some people are going to love what you have, love what you're doing. Thank you for connecting to me, connecting with me. Thanks again.
Thank you very, very much for having me on board. And also, if you are looking for any professional games, you can find me on startplaying.games/GM/SS Adventurer. However, you don't just have to come and find me. There are many, many, many other great professional GMs on Start Playing's servers. Feel free to browse, and I hope to see at least someone come and join us.
Thanks again, David, and be sure to join us next time as we find the best ways to have great times with friends and experience amazing stories through tabletop role-playing. My conversation with David was so good, I had to break it into 2 episodes. Be on the lookout for David's next episode, which revolves around the question, should you pay for a professional GM? And don't forget, if you want to design immersive, dynamic worlds for your gaming group, download the ultimate guide for tabletop role-playing world-building experiences using the S.P.E.R.M framework, S.P.E.R.M. Just click on the link in the show notes and you'll be bringing your games to life in no time. And may you keep having fun as you continue to make your claim to game.